What's up, y'all? It's Phil, and it's time for a quick tip. Now, this is something that I have run into a lot, building as many cabinets as I build. When I first started doing this stuff and when I first started learning DADOS, I didn't really do this because I wasn't doing them as often as I am now. On my current project, I've got roughly $3,000 worth of plywood just setting all around my shop right now in various pieces, and I need to cut end DADOS on like half of these pieces. Now, the way this typically works is that I want to fit a full-size sheet of plywood, which is just shy of 3/4 of an inch, into a rabbet lap on another sheet of plywood. Now, on that piece, I want it to have a depth of only 1/4 of an inch deep. It makes for easy math, and it also gives it just enough of a lip to add some glue, add some brad nails, and everything is nice and strong. I mostly rely on the DADOS and glue nowadays, as opposed to my previous videos before I started the built-in series. You'll notice that I'm like putting everything together using screws and templates and stuff like that, and that's not a terrible way to do it, it's just not the most professional. So now I'm building these cabinets properly, which more properly than I was before. Hey, we're always learning, we're always growing, nobody's perfect, it's all right. But I want that 1/4 of an inch depth, and then I want it to be exactly the height of the plywood. And the reason for that is because I don't know, maybe I'm just a perfectionist at this point, but I just don't want the plywood top to be shy of those edges, because that can also make it hard to install nice, smooth, easy countertops. It also makes it so that if you're putting it on a footer, which I do separate footers on 99% of my built-ins, so I want it to be able to set on a perfectly flat edged footer as opposed to having little tiny feet that can like cause issues and small gaps and stuff like that. So to get that exact measurement, the best way that I have figured out how to do it is to use a piece of scrap plywood on another piece of scrap plywood, put them together, and mark. Once I've got that mark, that's a pretty decent place to start as far as like measuring everything out. But the other thing I like to do is go ahead and set up my DADOS stack. Now, I know that I can put 3/4 of an inch worth of blade on there, and I could dial this thing in perfectly to the thousandths of a millimeter if I wanted to. I don't want to. I don't have that kind of time. So all I do is go ahead and set it up for 3/4 of an inch, which I know is too thick, but that's okay. Next, I take a piece of plywood and I lay that against my fence and clamp it down. I like to clamp it using that scrap piece of wood so I can make sure that it's just high enough that I can pass the piece underneath and it not be an issue. Once that's done and all of that is confirmed, I like to go ahead and measure from the kerf of the blade into this new Sacrificial board. So I keep my blade as low as possible. I mark 1/4 of an inch up on the bottom of my Sacrificial board because I know that's the depth that I want to get to. Then putting the board just about half of a blade kerf over the edge of my last DADOS stack blade. So most of the stack is exposed, but a little bit is still underneath. I lock down my fence and I start the saw and slowly but surely bring it up so it cuts into the wood up until it gets to that 1/4 of an inch line. Then I stop the blade from spinning and double check everything, making sure that I am really not any higher than that 1/4 of an inch line, and also making sure that everything has it's tight, doesn't have any wiggle room, any of that kind of stuff. I should be good to go there as far as my depth is concerned. But now I've got to figure out the width. So looking at that Sacrificial board that I had earlier, I like to take my mark and try to line it up and just eyeball it so that that outside kerf is just hitting the inside edge of that line. This is one of those factors where if I cut too little, I can always go back and cut more. If I cut too much, I've cut too much on every single piece. So I want to get this right the first time. So after I eyeball it and line it up to the line that I made on that Sacrificial piece of wood, I then turn that piece up and hold it against the fence. So my Sacrificial board is now being held up against my scrap piece, and I can eyeball it once again and just make sure that the edge of that kerf, the edge of that blade, is not getting past the front veneer of that plywood. As long as everything looks really, really close or almost perfect, I'm good to go. Make sure, again, everything's clamped down, everything's tight, put on all of your PPE. If you see me not wearing some PPE in one of my videos, don't comment about it. I don't care. Don't copy what I do. Your safety is your own responsibility. So once you've got all of your PPE on and you are ready to go, you know your safety zones. I happen to have a saw stop with a dado brake. You may not, and believe me, even knowing that I have a saw stop, this thing will put hair on your balls, okay? So you need to just make sure that you're in the safe zone and you know where your blade is, avoid kickback, do everything you can to be as safe as possible when cutting these dados. Now, using that scrap piece of wood with the mark on it, I want to go ahead and push it through my dado stack. So get that thing started, rev it up, get your dust collection going, and push it on through nice and slow. Get a good, slow, even feed rate, making sure that you're not getting any kickback, making sure that it's not lifting up away from the blade so that your depth stays at a consistent 1/4 inch all the way across. Take your time, breathe, don't be scared of your tools, but push it on through and you'll be good to go. Then I take the Sacrificial board and compare it to my other Sacrificial board of the exact same type of plywood. If at this point I've got a good, even meeting on the top edge, everything's perfect. If it's too shallow, then I can just simply adjust my fence just a little bit, do another test pass, and keep going until I get it right. If it's too thick, you have to add one more step, which is you need to lower your blade again, move your fence in toward the blade, then turn it on and bring it back up to that 1/4 inch mark cutting through the Sacrificial board, because if not, you're going to be rubbing against it and it's going to cause your blade to tweak sideways just a little bit, and we don't want that. It's a safety hazard, it's going to burn your wood, it's going to slow your blade down, it's going to put way too much force on your motor. So make sure to remember that you need to recut that Sacrificial board if you had to move closer to the blade. If you're moving farther away from the blade or you were fine on your first try, you're good to go. Now that you've got everything set up, all you have to do is get all your boards figured out and push them through. The reason that I'm doing this without a sled is because I like it to be repetitive. I like it to be easy to continue to do. If I try to use a sled, I typically only do that when I'm making a couple of cuts, because if they're not consistent, I don't want to do that 85 times like I'm having to do on this project. This way, it is easy, it is repeatable. The only thing is the danger of not having anything back against you. On smaller pieces, I typically do use my miter gauge. I make sure that it's set at exactly 0 and test it to the kerf of the blade so that everything is perfectly square. But on a lot of these bigger pieces, especially plywood pieces, the weight of the plywood is pretty good for just holding it in place. You can sometimes put some weights or something on it as you push it through, but a lot of times I just set it flat on the table, lift ever so slightly on the far end, push it through nice and slow, making sure to keep it right up against the fence, making sure my feed rate is not too fast, and as we get through, it'll come right through at the end, zip, and everything's nice and clean. I can double check the depth and set it aside and move on to the next piece. That is pretty much it. It is super simple, and I really enjoy using this technique. You can use it on any depth of dado. My example was because my plywood, although it says 3/4 of an inch, is not actually 3/4 of an inch, and it never is, thank you American capitalism. But because they can get away with that, I have to make up for it here in the shop. So you can do this with any depth, you can do it with any cut depth, any width, or whatever you want, modify it to what you need, but this is a super awesome way to do it. It's quick, it's easy, it doesn't require dialing in and taking blades on and off 17 times and wasting 45 minutes. Set it up once, you get it up inside your Sacrificial block, get your measurements and everything ready, and you are good to go for as many passes as you need to make. I hope this helps somebody out there. This was really awesome for me when I learned this technique, and I learned it right here on the YouTubes. So definitely check out some of my other stuff. I've got some other DIYs and whatnots going on. I've also got my built-in series that I'm still constantly doing because that's what I do now. Make sure to like and subscribe and check out my Amazon store and links for tools and things down in the description. I have no sponsors and don't want any, so go ahead and just click on some of those ads and anything else that you can do to help support this channel. That would be awesome. The sun just came back out. Thanks again for watching, y'all. We'll see you next time.